journey, growing freely, no ceiling, no roof, going deep with no stones to entangle my roots like they do.
Waking up tired and waiting for the horizon to appear. Remind me this work is all for love again. Looking ahead, I see hope in the sky. Give me access and I won't be denied. I won't let go, just hold tight to my hand. The world that we knew would return here. Living my dream without no fear.
You're the will wipe away all tears.
I hate that my hands can't touch you. My arms and soul hold you, the memories and dreams. Know in my heart that I won't let go. Misery every day, hard to be unafraid. Everything is not the same no more. Policies stay the same. They should be ashamed. They should try to hide their face.
The International Festival of Arts and Ideas is created and produced on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Paugussett, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac, in the land we all call home, Connecticut. We hope that from wherever you are, you take a moment to acknowledge and honor the native people whose land you are on and the history of the place you are in.
The International Festival of Arts and Ideas stands in solidarity with Black and Brown communities and other groups who are targeted and abused by unjust systems of oppression. We support all movements working to decenter white voices and dismantle white supremacy. We are actively seeking to dismantle systemic racism, and we raise our voices with those in our community who are already engaged in this vital work. We commit to working alongside you to create transformative change in New Haven and in our global community.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shelly Kiala. I'm the Executive Director of the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. Today is our last ideas event, our last panel conversation, and it is a thrill to be here with so many wonderful colleagues that I have known and gotten to know over the last 18 months. I want to thank our sponsor, AARP, as well as our partnership with Connecticut Humanities for making the Ideas series possible, and also all of the festival sponsors who have supported us throughout this year. So I'm going to bring everyone into the room. This is a room full of colleagues. We have lots to say, and I'm going to introduce them all with their organizational titles. And then as we go into the conversation, they can tell you a little bit more about other things that they work on or how else they identify their work. So I'm Shelly Kiala. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I mentioned my title. It's Executive Director of the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. Daniel Fitzmaurice is also with us. He is the Executive Director of the New Haven Arts Council, the Greater New Haven Arts Council, not just the New Haven Arts Council. Jacob Padron is here. He is the Artistic Director of Long Wharf Theater. And Jacob, are you also the Director of the Soul Project? Okay, thought you had a dual title. Angie Durrell is here. She is the founder and executive director of In Tempo in Stamford, Connecticut. Long Wharf and the Greater New Haven Arts Council are both in New Haven, Connecticut. And then Malachi Eason is here as well, and he is my colleague at the festival. He's the Director of Programming and Community Impact. So welcome to all of you. I can't believe we all get to be, I don't think we've ever been in a real room together, so I'm really excited we get to be in a virtual room together. we are going to dive right in. And, as you answer the questions and as we start our dialogue, go ahead and share if you wanted to name your gender pronouns, anything else about your introduction that I missed that you want to make sure to highlight. So we're going to start. This is about looking ahead, but often with looking ahead, it's important to look back because, we're on a journey. We're on a path that doesn't have really clear starts and stops. So if I ask you all to look back at the last 12 to 18 months, in terms of what's happening specifically in the arts and cultural sector, but in the world as a whole, what are those moments that stand out to you as resonant, as stuck? Some of it's probably come and gone through like water. Other parts of it are sticking and staying with you. What are those moments that feel like they really have affected and resonated with your work as a creative in your own right, as well as an arts administrator? And I'm going to start with Jacob. You looked ready to go, Jacob. You were leaning in.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, excellent. Well, first, I just want to start by congratulating the festival on an extraordinary an event last night that was so moving in terms of how you all brought the community together. And I think just this whole festival, I think, has really marked a shift. And it's really thrilling to see. So congratulations, Shelley and Malachi and the entire staff and board. I know it really does take a village to pull off something that y'all pulled off. And there's, always opportunity to grow and to evolve, right? And to transform. So, at Long Wharf, when we put on a big event, we're always holding joy and also holding challenge. And I imagine that was also part of the experience that y'all had. I love this question. I love this question in terms of thinking really big about kind of our future. And for me, when I reflect on, looking back on the last 18 months, there are two things that really come into focus. And I actually wrote it down. I said clarity around who we stand with and what we stand for. I feel like I really try to steer Long Wharf into thinking about our values, really thinking about, it's not just like the art that we put on stage. Yes, that's important. But as I've said time and time again, that I think a community, they do not get behind just one season. They get behind what you stand for and what you represent. And so that feels like it really resonates for me as I reflect on the last 18 months. The other thing that I'm thinking about, and the thing that has really crystallized during COVID, is that when you lead with your values, the right people find you. And so that is something that I'm also holding on to, that, not everyone is going to be on board, right? Not everyone is going to embrace the evolution of your company, going to embrace the way in which the artistic ecosystem is shifting in New Haven and in the greater New Haven area. And that's okay, right? That maybe this container isn't the right container for your offering. And that has to be okay. But the hope is that folks will understand that arts and culture, and in my case, the theater, is a space that can hold all of us, right? It is a space that can hold all of our stories. And what we're trying to do at Long Wharf, and what we're certainly trying to do, what we tried to do over the last 18 months, is build bridges to those who didn't feel like Long Wharf was a space for them. So that's what's coming into focus for me. So it's not an and/or, it's an and. And I'm really trying to amplify that message, that we have to be better architects. We have to lead with our values, and the right people will find us. So that's what's coming up for me.
See, I knew I started with you for a reason, Jacob. Thank you so much for that. I saw head nods. I saw Malachi. I saw you nod your head when Jacob said, we want to make sure that we are clear about the fact that we are an organization for people that have historically not felt welcome. Right? Did I catch that right?
Oh, Shelley, you caught that correctly.
So thinking about the last 18 months for you, I mean, did that resonate with you for a particular reason, what Jacob was talking about? And how is that playing out in your work? What moments stand out to you?
I think from what Jacob was speaking, what really got to me was I was just really happy that there are more art directors and executives and things that are on the same page, right? Sometimes the community gets left behind. And Shelly, you hear me talk about this all the time. Like, it's not really about what I can present. It's about what the community needs and how we connect with them. Sometimes, as leaders, we walk into situations where there has been damage and error about the company or whatever the case is. And when you're new to the company or the organization, we get stuck with figuring out how we're going to change that situation. And it gets really, really hard. But I do think that it takes a really strong person to realize that the problem has nothing to do with the new leadership. The problem is, the situation is that you have to get in there and have the heart to build. And just listen to Jacob, I was smiling. I was just like, because that's exactly where I'm at as, the director of programming and community impact. I'm walking to an organization that does great work in the community, but there are also some things that need to be worked on and massaged and to actually be brought into the light. And so for me, it felt good to hear you say that, my friend, because I worked really, really hard to build those relationships coming into this organization, just by meeting with people, talking with people, asking what they would like to see on the green, or how can we connect in the community and making those relationships. But what I'm seeing as time goes on, and it's not just here, when you build those relationships and you actually give and not just take, you have a better outlook on your organization, right? And things start to really grow. You see the change in the atmosphere. The culture of the organization starts to match what the mission of the organization is. And when you get the culture and the mission and the values to all come together, that is something that becomes dynamic. So yeah, that's just why I was smiling so hard.
Felt heard.
Yeah.
So Angie, what feels to you like it, looking back, as you're in this moment? We're forcing you into this moment in this hour of reflection. What resonates for you?
Well, I mean, so much. We were keeping track of week by week, and we stopped at 64 weeks when the country was slowly reopening. And one thing that resonates with us is there was so much fear and uncertainty, and not knowing what will happen with our families, with our communities, with the rest of the world. But it allowed us to reach out to our constituents and reach within our own family and just create a greater sense of loyalty in our own community. So I think that's one positive thing that I would say has come out of COVID. Of all the lockdown and the new ideas that came out of saying this is not working now and it wasn't working before. How can we change that? And now we're thankfully in a stage where other educational systems too are noticing and giving opportunities to out of the box innovative ideas that were already there, but they were not able to see them until the pandemic really forced people to create new ways to do work. And the other exciting thing, I think, it's just the opportunity to collaborate. I think we were all saying, okay, I can't do anything alone. I can't do anything here in these four walls. But what could I do with, Shelly's team? What could I do with Dan's team? So I think that's a good thing that has come out of partnerships that are built in trust. And that's the one thing that I'm looking forward to after the country starts to reopen.
It feels ironic that in a time when social isolation was happening, we were asking that of each other, that there also were connections ended up being made that weren't made in other ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hear you say. Dan, what about you? And I feel this push towards this, I was going to ask folks what's happening at the state and national and local level. And I know you really have your ear to the ground and you're very in touch with that work. What's happened over the last 18 months and where are we right now?
It's interesting because I hadn't thought about how what I'd reflected on does totally connect to that. But it was a year ago, basically, somebody checked the math that, residents in this community came together and took down the Columbus Monument. And there have been a lot of protests and different teach-ins and things of that sort, but that one really stands out to me over this last year. It just brought, it was intense, it was painful, it was hard, it was I was actually not there. I was on vacation, but I was glued to my phone watching people who were there and the conversations that were happening, and then the beautiful teach-in that happened the next day. And it's just, to me, it was like this, the power that the people in this community and the pride that people have in this community is there. And there's the right answer to that question, right? Like, I'm grateful for the choice that was made, but also it just spoke so much, I think, to like, even in this time, and especially in this time, we've got some of the greatest residents here, and artists and creatives and activists who just, they're fighting all the time. And I guess that's connected in an odd way to, like, it was New Haven's mark on this national conversation about monuments, about public art, about the way we use culture to uphold systems or to shift systems. And I was just proud that it happened here. I mean, I suppose to kind of like link even further, I mean, there's an amazing amount of, you know, recognition right now about the role that artists play in our communities. Even the role that, I would say even the way that we all have a creative identity that just is there, is resting in us. And a lot of people found it over the pandemic, right? But yeah, I'm hopeful that in these national, and even in, you know, a lot of my work is in the political space. So in some of these political conversations, you know, finding those pathways to folks who not only are able to provide support, like state public support, but also to see all those other intersections around different human rights that our government is not taking care of, and therefore prohibits people from being creative, right? The linkages here are obvious to me, at least locally. You know, you know, canceling rent, you know, the bail fund is doing so much work around that that's creative and motivated by artists and activists. And, you know, it's just this time where it was like we didn't maybe have our traditional gig, whatever it was. A lot of artists took up, I think, a gig that's more passionate for them and we're rooted in them. I don't think that's going to stop. I'm hopeful that that doesn't stop, because the justice part of the work is not finished yet.
Absolutely. So much. There is so much to dive into. So my invitation to this group of really deep thinkers and leaders was to jump in and ask each other questions as well. So if that happens, it's by design. I just want to share that with the audience. But I did want to just get to COVID for a second and say, you know, I think we're getting to a point. Well, we had a festival in person this year. We didn't have one the previous year. I think that some of the theaters around town, at least I've heard, are starting to think about and planning on events in their spaces inside, starting as early as August. Are you the first, Jacob? Starting as early as August with Hassan Minaj? Is that? No,
I'm not sure. I don't know if we're the first, but we do plan to do our first in-person event in the actual theater in August. Yeah.
So how I mean, in your different art, and I know you're doing a lot of teaching and work with schools, Angie, Daniel, you're often hosting events or convening people. How has COVID and the effects of how we've all been dealing with a global pandemic over the last year how is that going to affect you moving forward in terms of how you think about, how has it shifted the way you think about convening people and bringing folks together and doing the work? How has it changed the way you think about space, maybe even? I'm really curious about this one. And you can all just jump in now. Go for it.
Okay, real quick, because it's on me. I definitely think, all right, so there's a few things that came from COVID-19. One is making sure that people are safe, right? But also what COVID-19 did was allow us to think outside the box. And for a lot of performing arts venues, festivals, and theaters, we had to start streaming online. And when I realized that when we were able to stream online, people from outside of the city are still able to get that art. And I found it to be a great resource. I think that is something that I think a lot of us are starting to rethink. Like, do we present something in theater with a streaming option so that people are also able to watch things from their house? Because we are going to have like a year or some change of people just not feeling comfortable being in the same spaces. But I think, you know, when you look at the numbers, it's like it reaches so many people. So I think COVID-19, it took us for a doozy. But I think it also created us a space to program further than our four walls. So for me and with our company, that's something I want to make sure I bring up to see if there's something that we can continue to do, because I'm happy to even be backstage and watch it on my phone and, and know what's happening next. So it's something that I think that creates a different dynamic in theater or in performing arts, period.
Oh, I have such an opposite way of thinking about it, which is I think I guess I'll just shout out my spouse, who's a nurse, and in her leadership at the hospital, she keeps reminding me and her colleagues about how much trauma everybody has been through, right? So just like, and I think sometimes we do that internally in our organization, but even with our audiences, right? We're like, come to this and come to that and come to that and come to that. So I'm just very curious, what the pace will look like that we expect for people to join in, and actually to connect to your point, the Malachi, like the ease at which we will invite people to like come as they are, whether that means like they're going to come virtually, whether that means they're going to skip out for a couple of months, whether that means they want to do something different that we've not done before, and just to be able to like meet people really where they're at for the next little while. That's going to be, I think, critically important and not easy. Like, I don't know how we cope as a culture. I know individually we all have different ways, but kind of as a community, how are we going to heal in a way? And I know the arts are part of that, but again, we so often as we have been saying, program kind of in and around community rather than like with, and like really with those intentions in mind. So I have no idea what that'll look like, but the trauma piece is really, really real. And there are going to be people always holding trauma beyond COVID, right? COVID is a trauma of other kinds of inequitable ones. So,
but when you're referring to the arts, do you think that that's a conversation that maybe the people who are in higher leadership have with their patrons, or they come together and create a space where people can ask questions, or they can share what they're doing to update their facilities or their spaces so that there is some safety precautions happening? I think that, we often say that the arts change and it heals and things like that. And yeah, we're community based. But I mean, we're in New Haven and we're very close in space. I think it'd be a great opportunity for people to come together and say, listen, we know where we're at. We're about to open up. We're trying to do a little bit more things. Here's your options. Here's what we're doing to make sure you're safe. We're here to answer any questions you have, but being prepared for those. Sometimes we say community, but we got to remember, if we're saying community, the community means family. So the same things you'll share with your family to make sure that they're safe, we need to do the same thing with the community. So Daniel, I hear you. And your wife is completely right, because there are so many people who I'm at home. I know the things I've lifted, but I'm staying at home. But I think it also takes people like us to get together and actually have that conversation, because sometimes people just don't want to talk about those things. I think that we have the knowledge and the resources to actually sit and give knowledgeable information to our community of why or why not they should be in a space.
Well, I think to that, so I think I want to yes and that. I think that is true, and I think that there's a history though of not actually listening to community. I think the community has to, when you are co-creating with the community, you have to allow the community to, what I'm trying to do is adopt not community, but plurals, communities,
Yes.
right? We have communities, and when we talk about co-creation and co-curation, or when we go to communities and say, we want to be in partnership, we want to be of service, we want to invite you into possibility, really letting the communities really lead that and tell us what that can look like. Because, I think the history of kind of parachuting in or thinking that you have all the answers, I think that creates for not a very productive dynamic. And I think there's a real history of that, specifically with predominantly white institutions. And so how do we change the paradigm and really allow communities to be completely empowered? And when we go to them and say, what do you need? How do you want this partnership to be set up? How can I be of service? Where have I caused harm? Where can there be healing? What does reconciliation look like for you? Then you have to believe them and then take the active steps to make that happen. So circling back to your question, Shelley, around what has COVID-19 revealed, or what are the things, I'm thinking a lot about something, and I've mentioned this before on other panels that I've been on, something that Luis Alfaro, who's a playwright in Los Angeles, he said in response to COVID, he said, the great pause has become the great possibility. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is to allow COVID-19 to allow us to slow down and to think about the possibilities, to adopt a growth mindset, to move at the speed of trust. These are not the ways that we normally sort of enter into our spaces. This is not how we typically work with communities. And it's not how we are sort of built. That's not how our nonprofit structures are built. So the more that we can adopt a growth mindset to be emergent in how we think about our work. One of the other things I'm reflecting on during COVID-19 is a wonderful thing that the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, PSAB, they talk about how we have to be critical lovers of our institutions, right? So like, I'm also trying to really lean into that. I feel like that's the other piece that I want to hold on to. And certainly what COVID-19 has really amplified, like, sit in the shit, sit in where you're actually messing up, right? And the more that you can adopt a growth mindset and figure out how you want to move forward and how you want to be intentional. I think communities transform our institutions. Our institutions don't transform communities, right? So that's the other thing that we have to be thinking about as we move forward in this work.
That's awesome, Jacob. I wish I could, spend more time with you here in Stanford. And I just wanted to add that we are a community-based organization. We have the benefit and also the challenges of not being in a physical space. So we're not limited to being in a theater, being at a church, being at a park, which can be good because it allows us to decentralize our experiences. And it allows us to truly go to the communities, both because we have to host our activities somewhere, but also because we're very strategic and inclusive. So just inclusion it's a practice that we do every day. And what we hear from our communities is, at least from our student and parents community, is we're longing for that time where they can come together and play music together and enjoy each other's companies. And even when they didn't want to come to parent meetings back then, now they cherish those family nights. So I think that definitely the act of practicing inclusion for all of the communities, it's something that it's going to be incredibly important for healing during COVID.
And the other thing that I just want to add, yes, Angie, absolutely, and Malika, yeah, I feel like I think we're all saying sort of we're all circling around similar things and similar themes. And I think it's also important to say in the context of this work that we don't always have all the right answers too, right? That we mess up. So like, I know that when I, started at Long Wharf Theater and I really tried to be intentional with my work, tried to build bridges that maybe didn't exist, engage communities, engage people of color who didn't always feel like Long Wharf was a home for them. And this is deep, challenging, joyful work, but that doesn't mean that you don't slip up also. And so what I'm also trying to be mindful of is where, as a leader, I think sometimes we have to say, I don't know. One of the most powerful things that we can do as leaders is to say, I don't know, right? Let's be in praise of the imperfect leader. And so that's the thing that I'm trying to also be mindful of, is like, you know what, I'm going to mess up. My colleagues are going to mess up. My fellow board members are going to mess up. We're all going to mess up. And so how do we meet each other where we're at? And I'm reading Adrienne Marie Brown's new book. It's one of her new books called We Will Not Cancel Us. And holding change, this idea of like, what does accountability look like? What does real transformation look like? And I think what Adrienne talks about is that we also have to make space for when we mess up. And then how do we circle back and try again?
Yeah, and I think with that, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shelley.
I was just going to say what I'm hearing, which actually is part of the questions I wanted to ask you as we move forward, is that one of the takeaways is about space and timing and pace, and how, I'm holding this tension between reacting to all of the challenges that are, deeply historical and present currently, and wanting to address them because there's urgency, because there's an urgency to address COVID. There's an urgency to address racial inequity. And to your points about, wait, slow down, like you can't, it's not about a fix it situation. And I think one of the things that I'm feeling is that as we emerge from the global pandemic, hopefully, it feels like we're doing it, of COVID, and move back into the ability to do some of the practices that we have had as arts institutions in terms of how we put seasons together, or what a season is, and how we put festivals together and what a festival is. That returning to, there is no new norm. There's not a normal to go back to. Like, right, there's an invitation instead to say, okay, here's where we are now. Here's where we've been. Here's how moving forward with values looks, and really questioning everything, like taking a pause, questioning everything, and being intentional about the movement forward. That pace is a challenge, right? It's an artistic challenge as you move forward and plan. So as you all are thinking about, like, I'm really excited about this thing that's coming up that we're going to do. Like, talk to me a little bit about some of the why. Like, if we can kind of dig into some of the, like, here's the thing that I want to do this coming year, and here's why I think it's important in this moment, and dig into the specificity. Do you want to start, Angie?
Yeah. So something that I'm really excited about doing this year that has been long overdue is engaging disengaged youth, engaging new arrivals, engaging unaccompanied minors who are not just in the border in, our border states, but are here in Connecticut, are here in our school districts. And during COVID, there were many students that were not attending school at all, neither virtually or certainly not in person, because they had probably never been to school before, and now they find themselves in the United States in the middle of a pandemic, not knowing how to, connect with a computer, know the language, and navigate the system. So this is an exciting project that we were working with Stanford Public Schools long before the pandemic. We started, continued doing our own intervention through music and through culture so that we could empower them and say, you may not know your way around the school system, but your culture and your heritage is powerful enough, and you have something to contribute to us. So that's a program that we're very excited about, because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of students that were disengaged, and we really believe that that art and music education can help them make that bridge and make that correlation. So that's something that that we're excited to launch, and that thankfully after COVID, or partners in the school system saw that, yes, this is something that we really have to address now. It wasn't something that we can hide from or keep putting it off to another time. But now the students are here, and certainly with what's going on in the whole country, we anticipate there will be more students arriving in our school districts for this fall. So that's something that we're ready to go and ready to take it out statewide.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I just want to name too, Angie, one of the things I know that you have confronted, that your organization is working actively against, is the notion that classical music is white European only, and that musicians from other parts, especially Latin America, I would say, in terms of what I've seen in your work, aren't trained, like, can only be in a folkloric lens, right? And
yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The struggle continues, but now there are new people in leadership that I'm excited about partnering with. And yeah, there's this notion. So I'm an Ecuadorian violinist, classically trained. I love Mozart and Beethoven, and I can play that music. But I also love and want to be connected with my culture. And there's hundreds of students and families that feel the same way, that have experienced the same impact of assimilation. And one of the challenges to higher institutions or legacy institutions is to say, don't put us in a category of folk and traditional music. Don't put us in that category of world music, and we'll present it on the Hispanic Heritage Month, we'll present it on Black History Month. But, just include us in your regular season, in your regular concert, or partner with our non-Western instrumentalists, because what is classical to you, what is classical to Europe, it's different to what is classical to Africa, to Latin America, even to the United States. So it's just a redefinition of what is classical music mean to you. But it's just been a work in progress that thankfully now, as we celebrate a milestone of our 10th anniversary, and that there's a need for repertoire and there's a need to diversify classical music orchestras, the field is looking to diversify the canon, and they're looking at in tempo. So that's one thing that I'm excited about. But it's not just us; it's a lot of people that have been in this struggle together.
Thank you. Thanks for talking more about that with us. Who else has something they want to talk about? Like, oh, I'm working on this thing. It doesn't have to be fully formed. Like, part of showing up is showing up with our imperfections, right? So
I'll tell you. Well, I'll just say, because I love the comments too in the chat. I mean, I think something I learned myself, which we're trying to apply to our work in the organization, is just that intersectionality importance. Like, there were so many intersections for cultural equity that was just not a total blind spot to me, but we don't have a structure in our organization. We've been very focused on race equity. But again, even that wasn't fully formed in our organization. We just put a specific policy in our handbook around racial harassment, which is something that came up, in New Haven Public Schools, as we were in the process of adopting it, So it's just something we're asking ourselves as we move forward. It's related to pacing. It's related to justice, right? Like, how is this possible for people with kids at home? How is this possible for people of all ages or people of all abilities? Like, what are we doing to be as equitable as we can? And some of that is just internal, right? I mean, we're responsible for kind of the planning framework around that too, but like, we have to practice what we preach. That tends to be one of the harder parts. I would say the other thing, and it's a look back and forward, but we had not really been a re-granting organization at the Arts Council before. We've just been fighting to fix the problems with philanthropy and the problems with state funding, and so it's exciting to move forward and figure out what that might look like, because the fight will continue, right? You can't just re-grant every arts-related dollar through the Arts Council, but it's critical to keep pushing community foundations, individual donors, other kinds of funders to see that what we're doing a lot of our organizations are doing really needs a different type of investment. A lot of the community needs a different type of investment if it's really going to thrive. And I'm hopeful about that happening, but that feels like the longest road, unfortunately. But that's, again, I think, everybody has values, right? And whether they're good or bad, or they're known or they're not. And again, in this, commerce world we live in, put your money where your values are, right? And I think we see that all the time in who's hoarding resources and who's sharing them, who's giving, meaningful, ambitious, trust-based philanthropic gifts, and who's not. And so I hope all that can come together, and we could be some part of that.
That goes back, Dan, to the point about how can you be not just reactive, which is important, and react to things, but also proactive. The funding conversation is very much such a driver, right? And so that conversation is necessary. That work is necessary, even though it feels like it's not going to really be to a place where you feel happy about it for a long time. That doesn't mean it doesn't require our attention and our focus. And how do we build that in as we're also reacting to the moments that need urgency? So I said we don't have to go around to everyone. So if you don't want to share anything, you don't have to. But if something's resonating with Jacob and Malachi about like what you're looking forward to and why, and what the intentionality behind it is as you move forward, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Okay.
Malachi,
Um,
you just ended a thing, Malachi. So now let's.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
next?
Well, since you're asked, no, I'm joking. First, I want to say, Angie, you said something that was really cool that I always wondered, like, not given like a certain day or a certain section of a season for a particular style or background and things like that. That I hear you clearly. I think my question is always like, even when we do that, I think in the future a little bit. So even when we like mix things up and we make everything a little bit more general so that everybody feels equal, I feel like it still looks like we're doing it just because it's supposed to be done. So I kind of like trying to figure out like, how do we make these changes and still fight against some of the, you always get negative feedback, but people, I feel like in these days of time, we find things, people find something wrong with something, even when you have a nice intention. So if you have advice for that, it'd be cool, but I can go and tell you what I'm going with for the rest of the season. But I definitely agree with you. I don't think that there should be any split in anything. I think it gets kind of hard as a programmer. I'm speaking from like coming from a PAC now to a festival. It kind of gets hard if I have a day full of like 3 different types of styles of music, So then then the work comes, how do we blend those things together? Where's the story at that this all makes sense?
Yeah. I just want to say I was at another panel a few weeks ago, and I want to find out the name of the person that said that, but a lot of people go to us saying, we're looking to program someone for Hispanic Heritage Month. Are you available? But it's just the way you communicate with the artist. Say, I want to highlight you. When is good for you? So that is just a shift in language that makes a huge difference with these communities that oftentimes just feel like tokenized. But I would also say something that I've learned to be okay with is you can't always make everyone happy, and that's okay, and we have to live with letting people do it their way, like I can't always please everyone, and I just try. So that's what I always remind my team and remind myself, and I learned this just from politics as well.
Yeah, well, Angie, you said it and I didn't. So you cannot make everybody happy. You are so right about that. So thank you for that, for responding and giving me great feedback. But as for some of the things we have coming up over at the festival, my biggest goal was to actually attack some of the things that we're actually talking about right now, which is giving the community a voice. Right. So there's a population that's usually forgot about, which is the youth, whether you're from the age 21 and under. Right. And so sometimes we program and do things to people that have the money to quote unquote buy the tickets, not saying that we're not including them. So we have a Labor Day weekend, back to school weekend. That's going to be happening September the 4th and 5th. This is not a plug. I'm sharing with you the purpose behind it. So we want to do some programming in the daytime on the 4th, where we're giving back resources, school supplies, and things like that for that community, and for that age range for the youth of Connecticut. And then the day after, on the 5th, we have something called Vibe for 5 at 5, which is a 5-hour concert. And our marketing team and you said it doesn't have to be completely formed, Shelley, so I'm sharing some information, but it is on our website, so I can talk about it. It's going to be a concert that would be programmed hopefully through the community. So through surveys, through showing different artists, and everything throughout those 5 hours can be programmed through our community, which hopefully will show representation of people from not just New Haven, but from Connecticut in a whole. And my job would be just making sure that we're attacking and getting in contact with those artists so that they're all on our stage for 5 hours straight on that 5th. So it's a way for us saying that that day on the 5th is not programmed by the festival at all. It's really literally programmed by our communities. So we'll see how that turns out.
So shifting that, what I'm hearing you say, Malachi, is shifting that role of curator to facilitator.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting, it's a model, it's a way of working that I'm seeing other organizations also embrace, as is, not that I know best and I'm going to tell you what artists should come, but how do we hold a frame and facilitate with the knowledge base that exists inside of an organization, and then work in collaboration to bring work that resonates. Yeah, I think that's an exciting upcoming thing coming on. What's going on? I mean, Jacob, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. You can go in a different direction, but I want to give you the chance to do so.
I think when I think about what's coming up for Long Wharf, or when I think about our future, I think that I will continue to put my focus on culture.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's because you can have all the amazing programs, you can have a dedicated audience, you can have a wonderful artistic ensemble, you can have a community of ambassadors who believe in what you're doing. But if you haven't created the conditions that allow all of those folks to be seen, to feel celebrated, if you haven't built the right container, right? Culture trumps strategy for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I'm trying to work on at Long Wharf, and when I started my tenure as artistic director in February of 2019, I knew pretty immediately that I wasn't going to be reading scripts or really thinking deeply about a season planning process. My job was to be out in the neighborhoods, meeting with folks, getting to know our leaders, getting to know our local artist community, getting to know our staff in a deep way. And that's been an imperfect process, but that's the work. The work is to really transform the culture of Long Wharf Theater, so that way we can really manifest the mission and vision of what we're trying to, make. And in many ways, that's lifelong work. I'm just a temporary steward, but I do it with all of you. And the other thing that I'm looking forward to is how can we be more relational, right? How can the strength of our revolution, how can the strength of our movement be measured by the strength of our relationships? So I'm always thinking about, I want to deepen. I want to make sure that I'm really tending to my relationships. Again, as imperfect as that is, knowing that I mess up. But I also think that that's a part of shifting culture. So, I know that I won't be here forever. I just hope that, the time that I do have, I'm able to move the needle just a bit in terms of building the kind of organizational culture that allows Long Wharf Theater to be a space for everyone. Theater is for everyone. And that's what I'm looking forward to.
And can I also underscore, highlight that, because Jacob, when I got the press announcement about that you're doing Black trans women at the center again, that I was like, oh, that's cements it, right? Again, more than a pivot, but an adaptation. This is the second annual Black trans women at the center. And I don't know, I think that's the difference between, and kind of going back to what you were wondering, Shelley, that's not a reaction. There was a reaction, but then that caused a shift, and then you could repeat that, and it's enduring. And so, I don't know, I was just excited when I saw it, and I kept thinking about it. And I was like, where am I going to tell Jacob how glad I am about that, and how meaningful that is to see it happen? See it happen once.
Now, you can tell him now. This is the moment.
3 times and 4 times. I mean, that's, again, I think that's the sign of change. Or one thing, and this is not, I always have to credit Stacey Graham Hunt on my team for really teaching me this, but you don't have to do it. This thing we experienced the last 18 months, were requests from our community and residents and artists to be better and do things differently. We don't have to. Some cultural organizations exist outside of that world, and namely Yale cultural organizations. And the most harmful thing I find is when they pretend that, or there's a very narrow band that they're willing to offer. That creates a lot of damage, I think. And we can have incredible collections and fantastic plays that residents don't need to access. I'm comfortable with that, even though it makes me a little uncomfortable. What makes me very uncomfortable is that game that sometimes organizations like that play, that we want community to come in, but only on this day and only in this way, and only when we're featuring these types of things. And so And again, that thing with Longworth was like, yes, it's real, it's cemented, it's I think it's forever, Jacob. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you. Thank you so
Did you
much.
just throw the gauntlet down, Daniel? It's forever now, Jacob. Put it in the
Forever, you
box.
can't shut the door. No, I mean, it's not a band. I mean, once you open the door and you really bring
That's it.
people into it.
Yeah, you want it to be systemic. I just want to acknowledge the Elaine in the chat, who has been really amplifying the importance of disability justice work. And Elaine, there's not a whole, I know there's not time to dig in now. I would be happy to talk to you. And I specifically want to address when you say disability justice addresses racism, sexism, ableism, and ageism. My analysis would be that racial justice addresses disability justice, racism. So I think we might have different opinions on that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and how we celebrate that difference.
Yeah.
I didn't want to just, I just wanted to acknowledge your voice and thank you for sharing.
That's good.
Elaine is one of our treasures. Hey, Elaine.
Yes. No, that's a great. Is this the Elaine I met yesterday? No, different Elaine. Hi, Elaine. No, we're happy to have you here. And so I want to go back to Angie for a second and say, like, the rest of us on this, there's something different about you, Angie, in that you have founded the organization that you are running, right?
Mhm.
So, like, as we're talking about change and values and how to deal with a history that maybe you weren't a part of, but it's a part of you now as you come into a place that that still exists and that you're stewarding for a certain amount of time. Like, how does that play out in an organization that you founded on a certain set of values? Have your values evolved over time as you've grown, as the community has changed? Do you find that it's been 10 years, right?
Yeah, 10th anniversary. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you found, are you in an evolution? Are you finding that there's more tension like, how has that played out for you over the last 10 years?
Actually, no, our core values have always remained the same: to be relevant, accessible, and inclusive, to make classical music and native instruments and cultures relevant, accessible, and inclusive, and to connect that to language, to make music a third language, because we work with predominantly immigrant families or immigrant constituents. But as a founder, I feel like, it's just, it took sitting down in my practice room and saying, where can I have the biggest change? Practicing the violin for 8 hours a day. Am I really going to change the world? I might, but it's in a different setting. Whereas focusing on building something that I don't see in my community, well, that really changed my immediate friends, my immediate constituents, and it has. So certainly as a founder, we just kind of we feel like we have a big responsibility to leave a handbook. That's kind of what I'm working on, to say, how can everybody run this without me? And that's the biggest, the greatest joy, to say, I'm in this panel today and a team of 15 people are managing 1,000 students, in 2 cities without me. So I think that that's the biggest thing that I feel accomplished for. Mm-hmm. And just being of value. I think that as an institution, as an individual, as a mission, as, citizen artists that we are, I think, regardless of where we are affiliated with, if we feel that we're of value and that we are valued and and people value our work, I think that's a great takeaway. And I just wanted to mention or echo something that my colleague says, Robin Jurish, who I want to make sure I give credit to. It's that people want change, but they don't want things to change. And that's the biggest thing, that every time we see a new press release or a new statement or a new invitation or a new meeting request, it's like they want things to change, but then you still go back to doing the same status quo and business as usual. So that's my biggest kind of message and approach to all of our conversations and partnerships now, to say, we've been at this long enough, and what has changed in your form of operations, and is that really going to be the way to lead to the future? So that's something that I just wanted to mention, and in closing for this panel too.
So it was Elaine Peters that I met yesterday. Thank you, Elaine Cole, for telling me that. And she is amazing. And I did a conga line dance with her at Gough Street Park, which was unforgettable. She is quite a treasure. So we have 6 minutes left, and it struck me that this is a kind of rare situation in which you have all of us as organizational leaders typically are both the organization and ourselves, right? Like it's difficult for us to separate from that. The other day, Jacob, you came into the festival and said, I'm not working tonight. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be hard for me because I want to get introducing you to people. But I would love for you to give you a chance in these last few minutes to just say, like, why did you choose the path you're on? This is a question I ask myself, right? I could have been an artist. I could have been maybe, I mean, it's hard work, but like, why was this the path that I decided to go on? What is it about the world I wish to see that drives the work that I do? And I would just love to hear from you about your intention, not about your organization, but about you.
Mm-hmm.
I can hold silence, by the way, for a very long time.
Me too.
Okay, I'll say something so that there's not so much silence. I was trying to wait. For me, I realized this about 15, 16 years ago. I just really enjoy making impact on community through the arts. And then, like most of you guys know, I was on the other side of the entertainment business, which is like performing and singing and blah, 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 blah. But I realized, I enjoy the nick of it. I enjoy the organization of it. And then I love sitting back and seeing the people really enjoy a space together. And that gave me more of a high than me being on a stage singing background. So I just really changed things around and started building things towards where I wanted to be. It brings me more joy than anything to know that through the arts, that's what really can change. It can change the dynamic of community. So for me, that's what led me here. And I think that's what's going to keep me going forever. Even from this week was phenomenal for a person like me. Like I was getting a high every night, just seeing people get up, dance, sing, talking to each other. I talked to so many people I didn't know this week. It was just amazing for me. And we all had conversations or grouped together. So it's those moments that keep me going, that make me want to continue in this field.
I'll say, Angie, I resonated when you said being in the practice room all day as also a recovering classical musician. But I would say somebody once told me that I have a strong left brain and a strong right brain. And I sometimes say things like that to young folks, like interns we have this summer and whatnot, that like working in this field is like, you could really be yourself, or I want you to be yourself if you're going to work in this field, right? Don't morph, don't shift, don't feel like you have to be a certain way or, conform in certain ways, because so much that's the case in all kinds of fields, not just creative fields. And so that's what I love about doing this. And I love doing this here. This is where I'm from. I was born and raised here. So it's always a reality check to be back and, moving through places and with people who I didn't know when I was growing up. And so it's meaningful. It's meaningful work when I'm doing it as my whole self.
Before I became a theater producer, I was a social worker. And I think on its best days, storytelling and theater is social work. It has the power to change people's lives. Mm-hmm. It can be a catalyst to bring people together. It can be a catalyst to allow us to celebrate difference. And it can be a catalyst to allow us I truly believe this, to reveal in our collective humanity. If I am doing my job well, people come to the theater as strangers, but they leave as a community. That is what I'm always trying to manifest, I think, at Long Wharf. And again, that is lifelong work. It is lifelong work to hold art and activism side by side. And that's what I'm committed to as a theater producer.
That's good, my friend.
What about you, Angie?
Why going to the why I do the work that I do.
Yeah, what is it that drives your passion for being an organizational leader? What is it about you? Not about, so separate yourself from Intempo for a second and say, why is this the work that I choose?
Yeah. I think just like my family heritage or my cultural background, that it's just what we do. You know, it's like we're just driven to promote our culture, preserve our language, make people feel involved, make people feel included. And when we don't see that, when we see exclusion, when we see intentional, ways to keep people away from concert halls, from playing classical music because of different systemic structures, it just, calls me to say, that's not right. Let me try to do something about it. So wherever it may be, or whichever area it may be in terms of like food insecurity or whatever struggles people are feeling, I just think it's just in my nature to try to do something about it.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, those of you who were in the chat. I saw lots of conversation. Thank you for all that conversation. This was great. I'd love to continue chatting with you all. We can do it in private, or we can do it publicly. We can do it offline or online. But I think one of the benefits of everyone being open to talk and to work together and to be imperfect is that you need community to do that. That's not, if you embrace your imperfection, you realize, this is true for me, that you can't do it alone. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. And we look forward to continuing to work with you and to enriching and being enriched by the New Haven and Connecticut community. For those of you on the broadcast or who are listening, you can go to the festival website at artidea.org/survey. Yeah, right on. Ooh, a lot of years of that one. artidea.org/survey, and let us know what you think about the festival programming, about this panel, this conversation, and this chat will continue to remain online for you to resource as we move forward. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Picture me growing freely, no ceiling, no roof. Going deep with no stones to entangle my roots like they do.
Waking up tired and waiting for the horizon to appear. Remind me this work is all for love again. Looking ahead, I see hope in the sky. Give me access and I won't be denied. I won't let go, just hold tight to my hand.
New Haven, home to iconic landmarks, stellar education, culinary delights, and jazz. Our soul, hip-hop, funk, and rock and roll. Weave through our streets. Are you hungry? Want a bite? Gourmet, soul food fusion, or pizza all night. Thirsty? Grab a bubble tea, a coffee, a shake. Your sweet tooth is going to love our taste. Need a ride here or there? We have trains, planes, and automobiles, bikes, boards, and ramps you can feel. And when you are here, check out our shops. We have quite a lot. Specialty items, crafts and drafts, clothes and hats, books and nooks. All you have to do is look. Feeling adventurous? Check out our lighthouse, beaches, and sails. Get lost and found on our trails. Play a new game of historical fame. No trip to the Elm City is ever the same. New Haven is the greatest small city in America. Our people, our heart, can't wait to see you and ask, how do you do, New Haven?